Yeah, so thanks. Glad to be here. As mentioned, my name is Mel, and I teach at Oklahoma Christian University. I teach Bible there, and have been for a few years. Born and raised in Brazil, missionary parents. Studied at OC, and eventually went back to Brazil to do mission work. My wife and I, our kids were born there. We've been back about 16 years or so now. And since then, I've been working at also North MacArthur Church of Christ, and just highlights are those, I think. And here I am. So driving here, it kind of took me not down the main roads. It took me off some side roads, which was lovely. You know, a lot of trees and things. But I started having this feeling that, watch it take me to the middle of nowhere, you know, and just say, you have arrived. You look around, you're like, here's pasture, and you know, here's, and so I started to worry. And then when I pulled in and up top over here, there was not a single car. I thought, not only am I at the wrong place, that's probably at the wrong time. And so I really started to worry, and then tried a door over here, and I'm starting to sweat just thinking about being at the wrong place, and then walked around, and I'm at the right place. So I'm happy to be here. I want to start in Genesis as an introduction, and we'll get into some other points here in a second. But the story of Genesis chapter 1, chapter 1 and 2, the creation story, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. The creation story is just a lot of great, profound, interesting things that are considered and explored there that set the stage for the rest of the story. When it was written, it was in direct conversation with other creation stories of its day. And a creation story in the ancient world was less about trying to scientifically prove to the neighbors down the street that their creation story was, you know, scientifically better than the other creation story, because everybody had a creation story. These big powers like the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Canaanites, everybody had gods, and everybody had a creation story. And creation stories were more about explaining something about their gods and trying to validate and give credibility to the way they did society and how they rule the world. And so the Babylonians had a creation story, and they play a big part early in the story, and then of course later as they bring destruction to Jerusalem a few hundred years before Jesus. But the Babylonians had a creation story where basically they had this top god that created a couple other gods, and then they started to create reality. Then in their story, the biggest problem was there was a goddess of chaos who happened to be a serpent. And the goddess of chaos was trying to bring chaos into reality. And so the gods get all their minions and all their sub-gods, and they fight this big battle, and they barely win. I mean, it takes a cosmic battle. They barely win and beat chaos. And then as they beat chaos, they start to, you know, rule, and they have top gods, middle-class gods, lower-class gods. And the lower-class gods served all the other gods. Well, the lower-class gods got tired of serving the other gods and went on the first cosmic strike and demanded that the top gods create other creatures to serve them all. Does anybody want to guess who those creatures would be?
Angels.
Humans. Humans. The peasants. People. So in that creation story, people were tools. They were instruments. They were created to serve all the gods. But people are unruly sometimes. They complain. They smell. They don't want to do things. So you need humans to rule the humans. And this top group of humans are going to represent the top gods. And they're going to rule on earth, all the humans, just like the gods ruled everything else. Does this make sense? So if you're born in Babylon as a peasant, you are just a tool. That's what you were created for. And if they rule over you, that's just how things go. Well, here comes the creation story of Genesis, where it starts with a God, right? We know, capital G God, the God of the Bible. And this God creates reality. Like in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. And the earth begins void and dark and stormy, chaotic. In this story, it doesn't take a cosmic battle. It takes the Spirit of God hovering over the waters to begin a process of creation, a process of taking the stormy, dark, watery abyss into an eventual garden of delight, which is literally what the word Eden means. So where the creation story of the Babylonians, the gods had to fight each other, could have gone either way, to have some resemblance of order. In the creation story of Genesis, God just shows up. He is present. His Spirit is there. Order ensues. So his very presence is transformative. Does this make sense? Okay. Then he creates humanity. Not because the gods are complaining, not because the gods, need some lower creatures because they're lazy and they want to be served. In this creation story, all of humanity is created in the image of God. In the Babylonian story, just the top family represented the image of their gods. In this creation story, all of humanity is in the image of God. That already would have just been such a transformative, amazing, out of the norm, just out there concept. Because all the other creation stories had some version of humans being just tools, instruments, created to be ruled over. And in this creation story, in chapter 1, verse 26, it says that God says, let us create humanity in our own image. Let us create humanity so that they can rule. Babylonians, just the top family is ruling everybody else. The Babylonian Empire is ruling by violence everybody else. In this story, all of humanity is created to rule. I don't know about you. I don't know how many of you hear the word rule, subdue, which are a couple of the words used. I don't know how many of you feel warm, fuzzy feelings when you hear those words. How has humanity generally ruled? Do we have a good track record? Yeah, very poorly. Very, very poorly. But if we are to rule as God rules, in the creation story of Genesis, how does God rule? In the Babylonian story, the gods rule by force and violence. Right? It takes a battle. It takes blood. It takes, victory by arms. In the story of Genesis, the only ruling that we see exemplified in chapter 1 is that God hovers over the chaos and rules it into creation, order, beauty, harmony, intent, purpose, delight. Then in chapter 2, we are animated to life by dust of the earth and the breath of God, right? Chapter 2, verse 7. In the creation story, I forgot to mention of Babylon, humanity is created by, they take a junior god kind of towards the bottom, behead him, sprinkle the blood on earth, and then from the dust of the earth and the blood of a god, humans are created. So humans are created to serve and also created out of violence.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where's the Babylonian story? I've never heard it.
Yes, it's called the Enuma Elish. You can go online and Google it. Like, they have found all this archaeology that explains what they believe to be their creation story. And you can just read it, and it's all translated there. And you can do so with the Egyptians, the Canaanites. Most of those creation stories you can just read online. Historians have found what the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Canaanites believed. Does that answer your question?
So they didn't believe in the Bible?
Yeah, they had their own stories. And once again, this story is going in direct, it's pushing against those stories. It's trying to show the world that there is this God who created us with intent and purpose, is a God that doesn't require violence to rule. It's a God that is transformative. It's a God that created all of humanity to represent him. It's a beautiful story, especially, it is a beautiful story, especially in comparison when you contrast it to those
All those
stories.
different stories were created by man.
Yeah, yeah. But they believed it to be true,
Right.
and that's how they did their society. So a creation story in the ancient world was less about convincing people of science. It was more about convincing people of this is why our world is this way. So then chapter 1, we're created to rule as God rules, so a transformative presence towards better, towards from chaos to order. In chapter 2, verse 7, we're created by animated presence, the Spirit of God. Then in chapter 2, verse 15, it says that we are created to work the ground, to landscape the ground. Think of the ground as beginning with like nothingness. It's just chaotic. It's like, you know, some parts of Oklahoma, it's like this hard clay and rocks everywhere. And it takes intent and purpose to landscape it into pretty, right? To make it harmonious and beautiful and flowers. And so in the creation story in Genesis 2, we are to, like God, who transformed nothingness into a delightful garden, we are to be agents of transformative betterment. Whatever world we come into, whatever situation we come into, we are to landscape it, so to speak, into better. Does that make sense, the imagery? Okay, keep those two things in mind. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who, leading into, the 40s, the horrible mess of the Nazis and Holocaust, he got swept up into the concentration camps, barely survived, witnessed horrendous things, saw much death and violence and disease and abuse and torture and all those things that we're sadly aware of. After he came out of that and survived, he wrote a very interesting book called Man's Search for Meaning, where he argues half of the book is him telling his story. The other half of his book is through faith, right, and through psychiatry, he tries to make sense of when everything is just pulled away from us, everything is stripped, our dignity, our money, our health, everything. What really matters in how we live? And his perspective is we must live with purpose, with meaning, that even in pain and suffering, we can live that life. And he proposed 3 ideas that I want to suggest to you, and I think he had faith in mind, he had Bible in mind. The very first one is, he said that if we're going to live a life of purpose, especially in the face of pain and suffering, we should live a life of giving, contributing, which I think fits really well with Genesis. He believed, and I think this Bible is telling this, that we were created to specially, not in spite of, especially in moments of chaos, of uncertainty, of pain and suffering, of wilderness, of rocky soil. We were created to represent God, and the way we're to represent God is by giving and transforming and making those realities better. Jesus said it, you are the light of the world. You understand the group that Jesus said that originally to were the peasants of that world. They had no political power. They could not vote. Many couldn't even read or write. They had no position of authority. The governments didn't care. They were basically just peasants. And God, Jesus, as God with us, says to them, you are the light of the world. You can transform the world by acting in a way that reflects the presence of God. Galatians chapter 5, verse 13, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. Let me pause there. Especially in the West, United States in particular, we are very fond of our freedoms, and rightly so. We have seen what it looks like when tyrants rule the world and people have no freedoms, like, say, the Babylonians did. But Paul here is saying that the freedom that we ultimately have in Jesus, because he's God with us, is a freedom that we should not misuse. So let me go back to the verse. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. Although we were created to rule, we should not rule as the world rules. We should not rule to our benefit. We should not use the freedoms for our advantages. We should use whatever privileges, whatever freedoms, whatever rights, whatever money, whatever health, whatever we have towards the betterment of others, each other. Because God, that came with us as Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve. So we are to use the power we have to serve others. So that's point number one. We are to contribute towards betterment, regardless of what the world looks like. Number two is there is something powerful and meaningful if we approach the moment, the present, with the right perspective. If we approach every moment in time, even what we call the mundane, the day-to-day, you gotta stop and have a cup of coffee, or you're talking to a friend, or you're driving in traffic, or you're holding a baby and you gotta change a stinky diaper. Whatever it is, if we approach it with the right perspective. And what is that right perspective? Another way to think of it is to think of every moment as a gift from God, a sacred opportunity. If nothing else, to be a light, to show God's grace, God's goodness, mercy, compassion, forgiveness.
Speaking to all Christians, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, no matter what position you're in, how old you are, how young you are.
And it doesn't matter if you're doing something exciting, something mundane, if you're talking to a friend, if you're in the face of an enemy. If you consider every one of those moments as something special, that you trust that God through you will be doing things that go beyond what you even imagine, that you just do your part. Most of us spend most of our time either stuck, worried, and anchored in some past trauma, or past regret, or the past good old days, or something in the past, or we are deeply stressed, anxious, and worried about something tomorrow, at the cost of today. And we waste the today. Even things that we might consider unpleasant, like sitting with somebody at a funeral. I don't know if anybody enjoys that, but there's something sacredly divine about somebody that is in pain and suffering, shedding tears, allowing you to be alongside of them and represent to them something of God, some comfort, some kindness, some support. To me, one of the most beautiful verses in the Bible, there's many of course, it's also the shortest and easiest to memorize. Jesus wept. To me, it's profound because Jesus is God with us. And God with us is weeping at the cost of death to his friend Lazarus. Now, he then goes and brings Lazarus out of the tomb, but he's weeping because he can feel, he can experience the moment, the pain, the suffering, the tragedy of it all. When you're there with your baby, you know, they're crying and like, don't. I remember the very first time I was left completely alone with our daughter. Becky like nursed her, changed her, got all, then she was going to go for an hour or so, go hang out and go to dinner or lunch and just go, you know, get out. And so, you know, she hands me Aaliyah and she's just like, googie. And so as soon as she left, got in the car, guess what Aaliyah decides to do? Yes, but a lot louder and a lot more piercing. And did not stop for the whole hour. Becky was gone. As soon as Becky came back, I'm over there twitching, not, you know, emotionally not well. Then Aaliyah and I are crying. Like, I hand her back to her mom and she stops crying. And I thought, oh God, have mercy, right? But even that, what a blessed moment. As many have lost children to miscarriage and disease and violence. Like, what a blessed moment that at the time I did not know to appreciate. First John chapter 4, verse 12. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. When we are loving each other, Jesus later, you know, says, you have heard it say, love your brother, hate your enemy. And Jesus comes and says, actually, you also got to love your enemy. So if we're loving people, the good, the bad, the ugly, the crying, the, you know, like we're just loving people, there is something of God's presence in that moment. There is something, I don't even pretend to imagine or tell you what is happening there, but God is there. What an amazing blessing that we can live daily lives with such meaning and purpose, regardless of what society thinks how meaningful our life is. If I'm rich or have, you know, status, power, none of that really matters. But so many of us waste all this because we accept the lies that our lives might not all be that important because society does not deem it so. So what we give to the world, how we experience the presence. And number 3, and I think Viktor Frankl had some serious credibility when he suggested that a way to live with purpose is through the attitudes we have in the face of unwanted pain and suffering. Now, if you can choose between pain or no pain, let me recommend no pain. But a lot of the pain and suffering we face is not, it just, there it is. Maybe some choices we made where we thought we were figuring something good out, but it turned out to be bad, or other people's choices, or diseases, or military, or pandemics, or anybody wake up one morning and say, you know what we really need? A good pandemic. It just seems so like a scary memory, right? What a time. So those things happen in concentration camps and who knows what else. Like, what do we do in the face of that? I think there is great comfort when we can think of that one day, of course, we will have an eternity on the other side and there will be no pain and suffering and tears, and I'm looking forward to that. If God cares about my opinion, I'd say come sooner than later. But I don't think that's the totality of the good news. Like, we just got to bear this reality, and then one day, yay, we get wings and we fly away, and maybe we play golf for all eternity. I think there's something powerful now, because God's plan is not in spite of pain and suffering. It's not even, I'll eventually just erase the memories of pain and suffering. The entire transformative good news is Jesus on the cross, through pain and suffering, through the very mechanisms that evil has brought to destroy us, is the mechanisms that God brings victory. Death, the dying, and all that comes with that horrible mess. So I think it's not that, I don't think Viktor Frankl here or Jesus is saying, yay, just be giddy when pain and suffering comes. Go look for it. I know you know that you don't have to look for it, right? It is a world of pain and suffering. But through pain and suffering, because of Jesus, it already has meaning. The whole category, pain and suffering. Do you understand? So that's how your pain and suffering is already with meaning, regardless of the specifics of your pain and suffering. Because it's through the category of death that God has found victory through Jesus. So it's already meaningful. James says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. Why? It doesn't, like, if it was just consider it pure joy when you face trials, exclamation mark, that'd be bizarre. But what's the rest of it? Because you know that the testing of your faith brings perseverance, and perseverance brings an eternal reward. It brings a maturing of the kind of person that God intended us to be unto an eternity. So it's transformative because of what God and Jesus did, instead of it just being punitive as evil intended. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 13, Paul says, bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against somebody. I'm sorry, does anybody have a grievance against people? Is it just me? I have an ongoing list of my mortal enemies. I'm just kidding. It's just me? Okay. So y'all move me up on your prayer list. We've all been grieved by somebody, maybe today. And not just some wild, crazy enemy out there, sometimes by our spouse, our kids, our parents, our neighbor, our church member, our elder, our preacher, I know. But even in those grievances, there is something profoundly transformative that can come if we are willing to forgive. Should almost go home and be like to your spouse, dear beloved, thank you for grieving me so much because you have created the opportunity for me to bear and forgive. Don't say that, it'll create other issues. But you can thank it because it is true. We can bear each other and forgive each other because then you got to bear and forgive me. And so the grievances that none of us want, of course, or most often don't even intend, I don't wake up in the morning and think to myself, I'm going to find ways to just bring great frustration and pain to my wife. Albeit at the end of the day, that's often what I do well. So even when we don't intend it, it can still be transformative if we think of it differently. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 6 through 7, in all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Once again, there's Peter, just like James, putting joy and trials in the same sentence. They're not saying go be giddy, peppy, laugh at nobody wants to suffer. But because of what God did in Jesus, there is joy through suffering, not even in spite of, through suffering, because we know that God is using the mechanisms that evil intended to destroy us for our good. I'm not saying God is bringing pain and suffering to you, but he is using pain and suffering because he has so brilliantly and paradoxically used it for victory. And then Peter says, these have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. It's a paradox, but it's brilliant. A paradox as in it seems contradictory. God is sovereign. He is Lord. But we also have choice. How's that work? I don't claim to fully know. God is perfectly good. Yet we live in a world of pain and violence and evil. How can a sovereign, good God allow a world of pain and suffering, evil, which is often the very basis of people's atheism? But somehow, he is both good, and yet there is evil. Evil is about death, yet God is using death to our victory. How can we be first if we go to the back of the line? How can I be great if I serve others? Those are the paradoxes of our faith in God. How can there be power in submission, even unto death? How can there be such glorious justice through the injustice of Jesus dying on the cross as an innocent man? It gives you a lot to scratch your head, doesn't it? But that's part of the power of God. And that we have, to some degree, God has given us his presence in us, where we can, to degrees, allow that power to be transformative in us and others. Once again, through kindness, forgiveness, mercy, compassion, service, submission, love for our enemies. You know, sometimes I think, man, wouldn't it be great if, just like the apostles, we could go around doing miracles? I think that'd be interesting. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a superhero. I don't know if y'all ever had that dream, or once again, it might just be me. And you know, at times I thought, like, it'd be great to be Superman. All that power and speed, and you know, you could shoot rays out of your eyes. And then, most days when I'm driving and I'm having borderline frustration with other fellow drivers. Does anybody ever experience that? If I was Superman, I think I'd be like, yeah, you know, probably best I don't have those powers. But God has given us other powers. Once again, forgiveness, kindness, generosity, patience, service. Doesn't sound as glamorous as a cape and flying and superpower, super strength, but it is transformative. I think we need to rethink our perspective of pain and suffering, how we relate to pain and suffering, how we so intensely do everything we can to avoid it. And once we experience it, to numb it. We don't even grieve well. Most people, when you ask them how you doing, although you know they've lost somebody, what do they tell you? Fine. Oh, glad you're fine. No, I'm fine too. And we're both lying, of course, because neither of us are fine. we just can't wait for people to get past their grief. We don't know what to do if they're grieving 2, 3, 6 weeks later, 6 months later, 3 years later. So they pretend they're not. We're happy they pretend they're not. And we don't even grieve well. Because we just can't sit with any uncomfortableness.
You know, that's the war that we're always in, the battle, because we continually were raised that way, and we continually taught that to the world. And so, you know, we don't handle that well. But that's why we are battling that, and that's the war.
Yeah.
To try to stay out of that chaos that the world's teaching us.
Now, this isn't a criticism, this is just an example, because I'm happy we do have air conditioning. I'm happy we have indoor plumbing. I'm happy somebody already slices my bread so I don't have to, take the time to. But we have canceled services because the air wasn't fully blowing well. Because we can't sit with discomfort. Then you go overseas to some South American church where it has just poles, tin roof, and it is 105 in the shade. And you are sweating just thinking about being there. I think we have been softened in ways that have not been to our benefit, especially spiritually. Air conditioning aside. So, God created us to have power, to rule, not the way the world rules, because that's through violence, aggression, us against them, politics and all that mess. God created us with a green thumb, if you will, to come into a situation and beautify it, enhance it, bring harmony, purpose. I don't know if we're using it. Now, some of our gardens look nice, and I appreciate that better than nothing. How about our relationships, our interactions, our families, our jobs, our school, our communities? How beautified are those? What we contribute, how we make the most of the present, how our attitude towards unavoidable pain and suffering. Let's have a prayer. Dear God, we thank you for the beauty of your presence. We thank you for the reminders, sadly, often through pain and suffering, that this world is broken, but that your love is transformative, and that we are agents of your presence in this world. That when we complain that why isn't the world better, that we have a role in it. Help us to be mindful of the opportunities. Help us to shine into the darkness. Help us to love when hatred abounds. Thank you for Jesus and what he embodied, what he taught, and what he achieved. It is in your Son's name we pray. Amen.